From the City of Angels near the Pacific Ocean, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie. Welcome to Coast AM. Later on tonight, how do some people get so darn successful? We'll find out. Here's what's happening. A very grim online warning from a self-described American jihadist said that Sunday's terror attack in Texas was the work of ISIS, and that the terrorist group has scores of trained soldiers positioned in 15 states just awaiting orders to carry out more operations. The warning, which was posted on a file-sharing site, could not be verified. The chilling threat named 5 of the states where it is claimed that ISIS has terror cells in place. This is what they say. Out of the 71 trained soldiers, 23 have signed up for missions like Sunday. We are increasing in number. Of the 15 states, we will name 5. Virginia, Maryland, Illinois, California, and Michigan. That, of course, is the warning from this jihadist file. Let's check in with Howard Bloom. He, of course, has opinions on major stories that are affecting all of us. Howard, is this a scare tactic? What do you think?
It is a scare tactic, but it's not a scare tactic. Remember, Muhammad dictated that the primary tool of war, of jihad, was terror. And Muhammad dictated a simple goal, and the goal was take over the entire world, spread Sharia, spread a one-world government led by a Muslim caliph in which only Sharia is allowed to every nook and cranny of this world. And ISIS has been following these orders by planting as many people as it can or recruiting as many people as it can, and even people with whom it has no direct contact. It influences by dictating its philosophy. And you've seen that over the course of the last 6 weeks, the philosophy that's been dictated is go out in the streets and kill unbelievers. And the fact is, Muhammad left a very clear and simple message. Your only way to get to paradise, your only guaranteed express ticket to those 72 virgins, is through killing unbelievers. There's a verse called the Verse of the Sword, and it basically says, find the unbelievers wherever you possibly can, take them by surprise, take them by ambush, and mutilate their bodies, cut off their heads, cut off their fingertips. That's how you get to paradise. That's what Muhammad felt spiritualism, if you want to call it that, was really all about.
And Howard, we know that there are cells in France, obviously. There are cells in the United Kingdom. Why not have cells in the United States? We believe they're here.
Well, one of the most extraordinary experts on this subject, a person I'm proud to know, has said that a group called Al-Fuqra has had cells in the United States for 20 years. It's just that at this point, ISIS, which you can see has a lot of followers. Look at the murders down in Texas where a soldier, actually a psychologist in the Army at Fort Hood, walked in and killed a whole bunch of people. Yep. These are sleepers who are not necessarily in contact with anybody, although that particular guy was in contact with Anwar al-Awlaki. So there you have sympathizers. Those sympathizers may be very small in number. There may be only about 15 of them, 20 of them, 25 of them around the country. But if out of those 25, 10 go out and start killing the people in their neighborhood, or go to a prominent place like the office of Charlie Hebdo or the Kosher Grocery in Paris, they can wreak mayhem before they are taken down. And when they're taken down, they go directly to paradise and all of those lovely virgins.
Yes, they think that. Howard, thanks. Missouri police examining the cell phone records of a college student whose body was found Tuesday night after he vanished while trying to sell his sports car on Craigslist. Clark's car was located Tuesday night in a parking lot in Hazelwood, Missouri, about a 40-minute drive from his home and a half hour from the campus of Southern Illinois University in Edwardsville, where he was a student. His body was found 400 yards from his car. French air crash investigators are saying that Germanwings co-pilot, Andreas Lubitz, practiced a controlled descent on an earlier flight the day of the crash that killed himself and 149 people. Authorities previously concluded that Lubitz deliberately crashed the Germanwings Flight 9525 into the French Alps while flying from Barcelona, Spain to Germany. Investigators say that he persuaded the flight's more experienced pilot to leave the cockpit, go to the restroom before locking him out and sending the plane into a fatal dive. California's Water Board has now unanimously passed sweeping mandatory drought restrictions for the summer. The new rules will limit watering on public property and impose cuts of up to 36% on water usage from 2013 levels. And a Russian spacecraft that has been out of control since being launched last week will fall back to Earth and burn up on Friday. They say it'll hit the water. Don't worry, it's not supposed to hit land. Employees at a Pizza Hut in Florida praised for helping rescue a customer who wrote a message in her online pizza order that she was being held hostage and needed someone to call 911. Well, they did. And police arrived. They found a 26-year-old man who was the girlfriend's boyfriend and 3 of her children. He was holding them hostage with a large knife he turned himself in. Well, the story we had yesterday about the Roswell slides that were unveiled in Mexico, our poll, if we've got an Insta poll going on at coasttocoastam.com, most of the people think they weren't real. And today, lots of criticism about these slides of the supposed dead alien that were unveiled. A series of ufologists today are saying we are a little skeptical about this, but let's check in with Paula Harris, who watched by video the entire process from Mexico. Paula, what do you think?
Well, I don't even know how anybody can make any informed decisions without watching the 5-hour live stream. The 5-hour live stream was excellent. It was meticulously done. It had a progression of events starting with the Tom Carey and Don Schmidt presentation. And, I know those guys. Those guys are reputable. And I'm looking at Internet calling them scam artists and all kinds of names. And I've known those guys and have read Witness to Roswell, which is what researchers should be doing, and know that they were the ones that really did a lot of witness testimony in their books. In other words, they've got over 80 witness testimonies. One of the military men that actually brought the bodies to the hospital was one of the witnesses yesterday on this show, on this major presentation in front of 4,000 people in the National Convention Center there in Mexico City. It was this witness came on, 5 forensic witnesses, and the problem was, though, George, they did speak in Spanish, and I could understand them, so I knew what they were saying. And 2 American forensic experts came on, and what was done, and Jaime Maussan was very, very meticulous, was that it was a progression of showing, number 1, Roswell happened. Number 2, this is a slide that was analyzed. It was vintage 1945. Number 3, it was found in the house of Bernard and Hilda Ray, who had connections to Eisenhower. And what was very interesting for me is that the Eisenhower involvement, because you have to study the whole entire thing. The witness that saw it, saw the picture, the witness that they had, the Tom Carey and Don Schmidt witness that actually brought the bodies to the hospital, looked at that picture, and he said, they look like they're really dehydrated, but it's what I saw. So for me, that's the smoking gun, the witness. The only question I would present is the fact that it might not be Roswell. It might be another crash. There is nothing that labels that body, which is not human, to Roswell. There is nothing except the witness who said the body looked like that. And I don't understand how anybody can have an informed opinion without seeing that 5-hour streaming show. It was long, it was hard, but it's our duty. That's called an informed opinion. Because for me, thinking whether it's real or not is thinking, and it's not informed. So, I thought that was our duty to do that. $15 is the price of a pizza. I don't think it's that much money but it was long. It was long.
Paula, we've been trying to get the slides up on the Coast to Coast AM website, and we've been unable to get them. We're told that there's a company that owns them, and they may release them later, maybe for a fee. I don't know. Have you heard anything about that?
I have them. I have them because I took pictures of the stream.
Ah, you're smart.
And I took because they showed some close-ups. They also showed a recreation. They had the alien actually walking across the stage. It was amazing the way they did it at the very end. And we've got to understand one thing. I've seen the bashing all over internet. At the very end, Richard Dolan very, very articulately summed it up. He was physically there. He saw it all being presented. In fact, poor Richard, you could see him. He was really tired. He watched.
Oh, we had him on the show last night. He was exhausted.
He was exhausted, and I'm going, God, you're a real researcher. This is coming from information. This is coming because you were there. This is not something, for me, opinion without any information. And I admit, you've got to ask people to read Witness to Roswell. It is an incredible book, and I do admire Don Schmidt and Tom Carey. I've known them. I've met them in Roswell. I met them at the Roswell Festival. Those guys are not doing it for the money. There's no money in this. I don't know where people get the idea that there's any money in ufology. They're doing it because it's their life's work. And I think that we should stop bashing each other in this field because we don't need the government to interfere. The comments, the ignorant comments I've seen from fellow researchers.
Well, it's the internet, shameful. Paula, and that happens. Hey, thank you for your input. I appreciate that. Nick Pope, of course, formerly of the British Defense Ministry, said that he was underwhelmed as well. Up next, however, the man who started it all, the author of Chariots of the Gods, Eric von Daniken, joins me next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. The man's with us, Eric von Daniken, author of Chariots of the Gods and a number of other works, including Remnants of the Gods, a virtual tour of alien influence in Egypt, Spain, France, Turkey, and Italy. Eric, of course, first published in 1968, Chariots of the Gods, and he just took this planet by storm when he did it. He, of course, is the inspiration behind the History Channel's Ancient Aliens, and here he is, Eric von Daniken. Eric, welcome back. How are you?
Well, I'm wonderful. I'm sitting in Switzerland. It's about 7:20 in the early morning. Normally, I don't stand up at that time, but for you, I do it with pleasure.
We get along, don't we? And you're going to be on a plane soon, and I'm going to meet you at Joshua Tree in a few weeks here in California.
Yes, with great pleasure. And I will have at least 3 speeches there, some workshop and speeches.
Eric, I wanted to get your reaction. Have you had a chance to follow this story about these slides that were unveiled in Mexico yesterday?
No, I just hear it for the first time now in your show. But I know personally very good Jaime Maussan.
Yes.
Jaime Maussan is the man who made this presentation. And he's a serious personality. He's not the crook. I know him very good. I would trust him. He says the truth.
I do, too. I'm not sure if the slides he was given are authentic or not. Who knows? But I think his intentions are good, and that's so important in this field, isn't it?
That's, of course, important. But our scientific community and our politicians, they will never accept something so extraordinary. They always say it's not true, it must be a falsification. The so-called skeptics, they find all kinds of reason to debunk it. They will never look at it in the real way.
When you came out with Chariots of the Gods back in the late 60s, did you come under much criticism from skeptics?
It was an absolutely catastrophe. At that time, in 1968, I was the managing director of a first-class hotel in Switzerland. That happens because from my family, we were grown up in the hotel business. Now, just imagine, there comes a book on the market, which was an immediate bestseller also in Switzerland and Germany. Now the journalists come on, well, who is the author? A hotel manager? How can a hotel manager write such a book? So that was one reason why I was criticized. And on the other side, Chariots of the God was very provocative. All through, it had over 300 question marks. And the criticism never saw the question marks.
There's no question that something happened on this planet a long, long time ago. Probably it is still continuing to this day. Do you think, Eric, that these visitations have changed from the older days, the days of course, the Nazca lines in Peru, which are in your book? Have the visitations changed much?
I think so, yes. I'm a specialist concerning the past. I am absolutely convinced, and I think I can prove it, because I wrote 37 books about this subject. I can prove it that some thousands of years ago, extraterrestrials visited our planet Earth. Now, at that time, these visitors were described in a form as humans, and they had something which we called today's space shuttle. We have old texts, for example, in old India, or even in the book of Enoch, which is a prophet in the Old Testament, where we clearly see that some of the humans were taken up to a mother spaceship. And from this mother spaceship, they have been brought down to the planet Earth in a sort of space shuttle. We would call it space shuttle today. And the humans have seen these shuttles. They call it vimanas, or flying wings, or whatever. But they were here, and some of the humans were up there, and there was discussion, and there was scientific influence, scientific information. Some of these extraterrestrials, they gave to our forefathers the knowledge about the moon, and the sun, and the solar system, about our calendar. So all this was in Stone Age time, long before normal human science was established. So really, I can prove that case. We were influenced in the past. Now today again, we have all these UFO fights. And as I realize, they have different forms, different size. Mostly they are not directly in contact with us. They don't show up before a big crowd, for example, over New York City or whatever. So maybe these are different beings. Maybe these are not the same beings as the one who were here some thousands of years ago.
That's a good point. The cradle of civilization in Iraq, in India, where all these ancient stories have come from. Why that region, Eric? Why do you think they selected that spot, those spots, to do what they did?
You see, in Europe, for example, or in Canada, at that time, some 10 to 14,000 years ago, at that time, there was still the end of the last ice age. There were forests. It was cold. It was not the geographic location where civilization grew up. All the civilizations in antiquity grew up right and left from the equator. So in India, it was a normal climate at that time, but not in Europe or, for example, in Canada. So humanity developed there and not in the northern part of our planet.
Eric, I understand you had your 80th birthday just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, that's just 2 weeks ago. It was fantastic.
Good for you. 3,000 guests. Astronaut Edgar Mitchell sent a video message to you. I think that's fantastic.
And a lot of scientists, and that was in Germany, in a city near Stuttgart. And there was a hall for 3,000 persons. And I was really happy to receive. By the way, I had a speech there for more than 2.5 hours. And the 3,000 people gave me a standing ovation. I was happy.
Oh, I've got to tell you, at every event I've been at that you've been at, you've got more energy than everybody there combined.
You see, I'm 80, but I don't feel like 80. My brain is working perfectly. I have forgotten nothing what I have learned in my life. The only problem I have from time to time is the vocabulary in the English or French language. You understand, I speak English, but sometimes I have problems to express myself.
Well, you're doing pretty darn good. Stay with us, Eric. We're going to hit this break, and we'll come right back and talk more with you. Eric von Daniken, author, of course, of Chariots of the Gods and so many other works, including Remnants of the Gods as well. We're going to take calls with Eric next hour as well. We've got him for about an hour and a half, and I will be with him at the Contact in the Desert event. And you can come by and see Eric von Daniken live and in person by coming out there. We've got that under our highlight reel at coasttocoastam.com. He is quite a guy, I'll tell you that. If you need to contact me, that's George at coasttocoastam.com. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. Eric Von Daniken with us. He is in Switzerland. Eric, did you know the late Zecharia Sitchin, and what did you think of his work?
Of course I knew him. We were good friends. Well, in earlier days he was a journalist, and then he came up and learned Sumerian cuneiforms, and he translated some of the Sumerian text, and he did it, to my knowledge, in a very perfect way. So first he came up with this idea that there is a 12th planet in our solar system. I did not agree with this idea of the 12th planet. There might be some objects far out than Pluto, for example. But I don't think that we have a 12th planet in our solar system surrounding the sun in 3,600 years. But Zecharia Sitchin's idea of new translations of the Nephilim, of the beings who were here, who influenced, who made our forefathers to slaves, I always agreed with this. He was brilliant, but he died.
He did. 90 years old. We had given him an award at the Conscious Life Expo, and then he passed on a few months after that. But I did have a great opportunity to meet him. And these people who have done so much research into this field, including yourself, of course, are there any other people coming up? Do we have younger people following in your footsteps, Eric, like the Giorgio Tsoukaloses?
Oh, yes. You see, in Germany, we have an organization which is called the Society for Ancient Aliens and Archaeology and SETI. And among our society, we have 8,000 members. And I would say at least 20% of these 8,000 are young people. They are students. They come from different, let's say, faculties. Also, we have about 5% scientists. And I see it in the German literature. There is not only any more people who write about UFOs and ancient aliens. More and more scientists are coming up and join the wagon. And I'm happy to see this, because we need it. We need a new generation to grow up and to know all these things.
Eric, you have said and you have written that the gods will return. Tell me about
Definitely.
that. Tell me about that. Explain that.
Look, in antiquity, for example, when Francisco Pizarro was the Spanish conqueror of today's Peru. When Francisco Pizarro, 450 years ago, came to Peru, the natives believed in the beginning that he was the long-awaited god. The same thing happened in Central America. Hernando Cortés and the Aztecs. The chief, the king of the Aztecs, Moctezuma, believed in the beginning that Hernando Cortés is the long-expected god. The same thing happened in the South Sea with the conqueror like James Cook. When he for the first time came to Hawaii, the natives of Hawaii, they believed that James Cook was the long-awaited god. And so on. In every culture of the world, whenever the first connection took place with some white explorers and the natives always believed that they are the long-awaited god. Now, time has passed. In our today's religion, we have the same thing. I am educated as a Christian, as a Catholic, and we Christians believe that one day Jesus will return. Mm-hmm. But the Muslim society has the same expectation. They wait that their Mahdi will return one day. As we know, the Buddhist society, the same thing. The Jewish community, the same thing. The Jewish community is waiting for the return of their Messiah. So the idea that somebody returns is not a Christian idea. It existed long before Christianity, and it is still alive in every religion. Now, honestly, not every religion can be right. Some of them must be wrong. And I'm sorry, they are all wrong. Neither Jesus or Messiah or Mahdi or whatever will return, but some extraterrestrials. Why do I say this? Because these extraterrestrials, some thousands of years ago, they promised it to our forefathers. When they left the planet, they told our forefathers, we will return in a faraway future. Do not forget this. And this all entered in the mentality and in the holy book of the humans. They will return. Maybe they are here already. And I would think it's better for mankind to deal with such a possibility or to think about such a possibility. If we don't do it, we simply have a shock. We are just completely shocked because one day they show up clearly for everyone, and this is the shock of humanity. And we can avoid this. Simply be prepared and think about this possibility.
Why did they leave, Eric? Why didn't they just stay?
Well, in my opinion, in antiquity, they were something like today's ethnologists. Now, ethnologists, they study a few tribes, they learn a few language, then they give a little advice for a society, then they disappear again, and they promise to return. Every ethnologist today does not stay with his tribe for an eternity. They leave, and later they return. And in that case, it's ethnologists from an interstellar point of view. You mean there are some light years between their society, their home, and our planet. So they cannot return in a short while. It always, between one visit and the next one, we will have a few thousand years.
Well, it's incredible research that you have done. Now, let's talk a little bit, if we can, about Genesis. If you read Genesis and you put in, instead of angels, you replace it with extraterrestrials, it starts to really make sense, doesn't it?
Not only in the Bible. You see, this word angel, we think angels are some messengers from the sky. And angels, for example, in stone cave paintings or chiselings, you see them with wings and with helmets and with rays around their heads, etc. Simply change the word angel into extraterrestrial, and you have a different knowledge. And this is clear. You have to make it. Take, for example, the Bible. First book of Moses 1:6. And there you read, when the fallen angels, in some translations you read, the sons of the gods, when the fallen angels descended to the earth, they saw the beauty of our women, and they took them to wife. Now, if you take the word angel as something spiritual, something connected with the almighty true God, these kind of angels would never have sex with humans, but they had sex. And by the way, not only in the Bible, in different old books, and I'm a specialist of it. The same thing happened in the past. Some of our ancestors, for example, Abraham, were taken into the heaven. But the heaven is not the place of happiness. The heaven was a place of teaching. They were taught and taught in different belonging, and then they returned to earth. Just change the word heaven into space. So you have two words now, angel and space. Now, what is an archangel? The archangel is one of the leaders of a group of extraterrestrials. You just have to change about 10 words of ancient knowledge, ancient traditions, and you become a complete new translation. And exactly this is done at the moment. In Germany, for example, we have a professor, Dr. Burgard. Burgard is a doctor in Sumerology. That means these people, they know how to translate the cuneiform of Old Sumerian. And he made now a new translation of an old text. And he told me, Eric, this is absolutely fascinating. We were wrong in the past. We need new translations. We live in another world now. There is another spirit of time. Our forefathers, the professors and doctors who translated these old texts some 150 years ago, they were definitely brilliant humans with brilliant brains. There was nothing like being false or wrong. But they translated from their point of view, which means their spirit of time, their zeitgeist. 150 years ago, there were no aircraft. You could not speak about space travelers and all these things. Now you can. In science, it's usually that you take the next possible logical answer. 150 years ago, the religious translation was the next possible logical answer. In the meantime, in our spirit of time, the next possible logical answer is the influence of extraterrestrials, and everything makes sense.
It sure does. Now, in Genesis, as they talk about Satan, the cast down angel, the bad angel, could that have been an extraterrestrial that just went nuts?
Look, George, grown up as a Christian, they told me when I was a boy, when you live honest, when you don't kill somebody, when you don't do wrong things, after your life, you will go to heaven.
That's right.
They told me heaven is the place of absolutely happiness. Heaven is the place where you are near to God. Now, you just mentioned it. In the same heaven, there was a war. One day, an archangel with the name of Lucifer came to the throne of God and said, "We don't serve you anymore." And then the Almighty God asked for the archangel Michael to destroy or to put out of heaven the Lucifer. So you cannot be in a place of absolute happiness near to God and at the same time have an opposition, have a fight. Both together does not work. So change the word of heaven into space, and you have a war in space, which makes sense because in the book of Enoch, or everyone is familiar with the Greek god of Apollon and his father Zeus. But before Zeus arrived in our solar system, he had to fight in the sky against another one called Kronos. Or take the old Indian text in the 5th book of the Mahabharata, which is part of old Indian Vedas. There you clearly can read that 3 gigantic cities, and they call it cities, surrounded our planet. And the ancient Indian makes clear difference between the stars and between these cities. They observed the cities which surrounded our planet. And of a sudden, some gigantic weapon and a war took place in heaven. 2 of the cities were destroyed. And you can read this in ancient Indian texts, and not only in this text. It's not imagination. We had eyewitness some thousands of years ago, and we should better reconsider this.
Why do you think they came to our planet? What did they see here?
Now it becomes very complicated.
Yeah.
You see, until a few years ago, we always believed that our planet is something completely unique in the universe. We thought we are not too close to the sun, so it's not too hot. We are not too far away, it's not too cold. We are in the right distance. So our planet Earth is something unique in the universe. In the meantime, thanks to Hubble telescope, we know that only in our Milky Way we have about 4.5 billions of Earth-like planets out there. 4.5 billions only in our Milky Way, not in the other Milky Ways. So there are enough of planets who are like us. The ones who started their game is called in the scientific terminology, you call it panspermia. One day they started to spread out their own form of life because they want to have other civilizations similar to them. It's a long process. I will show it in pictures and in a computer animation in Joshua Tree how it works. On the radio, this is not possible. That means finally, we, the humans, we are the offsprings of another solar system. This does not contradict evolution. It sounds like it will contradict. It does not. It's just too complicated for the radio. According to this, we are the offsprings, and again, the old holy writings say it. The gods or God created humans according to their own image.
Well, that is exactly right. I mean, you've got it down to a science.
Of course. I mean, what I say and what I show in my books, in the meantime, you clearly can show it to the scientific community, and it makes sense. Just a few days, I had in Switzerland a normal speech at the university, and just at a real university level, scientific level. It was not for the public. There were only about 45 students and 2 professors there. And I was talking about the old Indian writings where flying machines are explained. And these old Indian writings make clear difference between machines which have wheels, which surround around the earth, and machines without wheels, which go up to the earth, including the moon. After my explanation, one of the professor came to his students and he said, well, we have to look at this all in a natural way. The humans always wanted to have some cars. Today, the rich people, they buy a Mercedes or a Ferrari. If they are rich, they buy 3 or 4 of them. And in the antiquity, it was the same thing. The rich people wanted to have a chariot, and the chariot was brilliant and had horses. Now they were running in a fast, and the air was through their hair, so they had the feeling of flying. So that's the natural explanation. And then in the debate, I say to the professor, listen, we have clear differences in old Indian texts between chariots which were on the ground with wheels and chariots which were flying. There is a difference. And he said, I'm sorry, I do not know these old texts. It's always the same thing. The other side, who is in opposite of us, does not know enough about our knowledge. Whenever I talk to a scientist, for example, a doctor in Egyptology, I know that he knows much more about his field than Eric von Däniken. But on the other hand, I know much more than the professor in Egyptology about my field.
That's right.
So it's always a question, how do we come together? How do we deal in honesty, in friendness, and not cheating or lying each other? And in each time, when we have a debate after 2 or 3 hours, the other side says to me, I'm sorry, we did not know about these texts and these ancient things.
Are the ETs coming from other planetary systems or other dimensions?
We don't know. Well, in antiquity, I would say other planetary systems, not planets in our solar system. I say this because some of the discussion took place. Some of the humans asked the ETs, their so-called gods, where do you come from? And in none of the cases they said, we come from another continent, like Atlantis, or we just come from another planet in your solar system. It was always other planetary systems. Now, today, the situation might be different, because when we see good movies, films about these UFOs, you see that the form changes. It looks as if they came out from another dimension, as if they are here sometimes just for a few seconds and disappear again, or they change their form. It's not comparable to the ones who were thousands of years there. They clearly said, we came from another solar system.
Eric, we're going to come back in just a few minutes and take phone calls with you next on Coast to Coast AM. Okay, final hour with Eric von Däniken. We're going to chat with him a little bit more, then take your phone calls here on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast. Eric von Däniken with us. Eric, those Nazca lines in Peru, what did they make them with? I mean, they've been there for all these years. They're not weathered away. How do they stay there?
You see, there are different things in Nazca. First of all, when you fly over the desert in Nazca, and for those who don't know what Nazca is a desert about 500 kilometers south of Lima, the capital of Peru. So if you fly over them, you see first some figures in the ground, made of fishes, monkeys, spiders, and all kinds. And they are very simply to produce. You simply have to scratch away the stones and the sand from the surface, and then a brighter shining ground comes up. So that's all. But the next thing you see, if you are a little higher in the air, you see some lines. Now you have to difference again. They are small lines. With small, I mean about 1 meter large. But the longest of them is 23 kilometers long, over hills and mountains straight ahead. Then you fly again higher. What you see is next is something which looks like airstrip. It really looks like airstrips. I never said it is an airstrip, but it looks like. That means it starts abruptly, ends abruptly. It's about 85 meters wide, and the longest of these airstrip-like lines are 3.8 kilometers long. Now, I always have written about Nazca as something unique in the world, but Nazca is not unique in the world. In the meantime, thanks to our satellites, scientists have discovered in the northeast of Jordania, in a place called Harat al-Sham, hundreds of other gigantic signs. They are circles. They are some sorts of triangles, hundreds of them. The same thing happened in South Africa. The same thing was found in Ustyurt. Ustyurt is in today's Russia. So in the meantime, we have 5 different sites outside of Nazca in the world, and all these people some thousands of years ago had no contact between each other, but they all made gigantic signs in the ground which you can see only from above. You have to fly it, otherwise you don't see it. By the way, when I am in Joshua Tree in a few weeks, I will show these new discoveries and I will compare it to Nazca. And the question remains, why, for heaven's sake, have our forefathers, Stone Age people, made these signs? And only if you know the old literature, I mean the literature which speak about flying beings, all these signs becomes a sense. Without the literature, if you don't know the literature, it makes no sense. It's just a game. They played something. It was not playing. It was because they knew there are flying beings overlooking our planet, and they want to give them gigantic signs. Please come to us. We understand you. We have offerings for you, etc.
Eric, what would you say is the most compelling form of evidence that would convince everybody that these extraterrestrials do exist?
Again, we have to differentiate between old literature or between facts, some things which you can see optically. From the optical point, it's still the tombstone of Palenque. To understand this, Palenque is a place in Mexico. Palenque is an archaeological place from the Maya culture. And in 1952, under a pyramid, they found a tomb. I mean, under a pyramid 7 meters in the ground. They found a tomb. The tomb was covered by a tombstone, and it's a big stone. It has 3.8 meters in long and 2.2 meters large, one block. Now, on the stone is a chiseling. You see something like a frame, and inside the frame, there's a human being sitting in a sort like a racing motorcyclist. He definitely uses his 2 hands to manipulate some control. He's sitting on a chair, and outside this frame, you see something like a linking flame. Now, what is important to all this? In 1952, this tombstone was discovered by Professor Dr. Rutz Lullier, a Mexican-French archaeologist. And at that time, the scientists were meaning this tombstone, this chiseling, shows the ruler Pacal. Pacal was the second last ruler of the city of Palenque. And this is still true. It is Pacal because you find writings on it. In the next decades, they said Pacal is falling into the monster, the open mouth of a monster. He's falling into the earth. But out of his chest, you see the tree of life and the cross of life, etc. Now, the important thing is the newest scientific explanation comes from true professors from the University of Texas. Their name is Stewart and Stewart because it's the father and the son. And they are absolutely the world-recognized best epigraphs. Epigraphs means translator of old Maya writings. And in their newest book, they say, yes, it is Pacal, the second last ruler of Palenque. But Pacal is not falling into the ground, into the earth. And there is no tree of life or cross of life. Pacal is definitely flying away from our planet Earth out into the universe. And they even say every little detail on this gigantic stone can in the meantime be interpreted in a scientific way, and it all has to do with cosmos and with the universe. So the situation has changed. If somebody looks at this picture of this tombstone of Palenque, everyone with modern eyes sees the same thing. Here, some technology is chiseled in an old stone.
All right, let's go to the calls right now for you. We'll go to New Jersey. Dave's with us. Welcome to the program, David. You're on the air with us.
George, it's a pleasure. Mr. Von Daniken, it's really an honor speaking with you, sir. I was born in Chester, Pennsylvania in 1958. We moved to a place called Westtown, Pennsylvania. From the moment we got to Westtown, I had visitations as a very young boy. I didn't understand it. I wasn't afraid of it. But to this day, I remember my mom was doing dishes, and I tugged on her skirt. I said, "Mommy, the little people were in my room again." And she goes, "You were just dreaming." And I remember walking out of the kitchen going, "It wasn't a dream." Until I was in my teens, there was one night there was a being on my right, being at the foot of my bed, and a being to my left. The being to my left put his hand on my arm, looked me in the eyes, and said, "We've seen you before, and we'll see you again." And they put me to sleep. And then I moved up to northern New Jersey, and I felt, okay, I'm away from it. Went to a dentist. He took an X-ray. He goes, "You've got something in your nasal passage. Have you had brain surgery?" I said, "No." So we went back to look at the X-ray. The X-ray was clean. Now it wasn't there. And I said, "How do you explain that?" He goes, "I can't."
An implant, no doubt. Do you get many references like that, Eric, of abduction cases?
No, because this is now modern. This is so-called abductions and UFO literature. I'm not a specialist in it. Of course, I know a lot of the UFO literature, and I know of these abduction cases, and I know new Professor Dr. John Mack, etc. But I'm not familiar in my research with these cases.
Okay, next up we go to Frank in Brooklyn, New York. Hi, Frank. Welcome to the program. You are on the air with us.
Hi, good morning, George, and Eric also as well.
Hi, Frank.
Nice topic. Hi. Just there's two comments I have. I want to stick to the topic, but I will mention that in my second comment. The first comment was what Eric said, and also what Howard earlier had said. Because I used to be a Muslim, but I left the religion. I'm a mystical Christian. I was Christian, at birth anyway. But there's a lot of misunderstanding about the Islam and misinformation. But like the Method he mentioned and the European explorers coming over, I don't think that's exactly correct. There's a connection there. The Method is supposed to make the way for Jesus in Islam, and Howard was saying that Prophet Muhammad was like spreading terrorism, and that was not true. I think there has to be more, factual knowledge. Like people have to actually read Islamic literature to understand what actually is going on. And something like that. Anyhow, with the, I don't think UFOs that are material are immaterial angels. Angels are not material. I believe they could become material. Angels could, but and the aliens could also be psychic or even spiritual. But I don't think they're the same, So it is my comment, in my opinion, of course, and I'm off the air.
Sure. Well, and that's an interesting question, too. Eric, do you, even though you're brought up as a Catholic, and
yes, I brought up as a Catholic, and I never lost my God. I am still a deep believer in God, and I'm one of these people who still pray every evening. I mean, let me explain this very shortly before I go to the immaterial angels. You see, imagine that we were visited from outer space some thousands of years ago. So the next question has to be, where did they come from? What is their evolution? So you can say, well, they were influenced from another solar system too. Okay, what about the others? What is the starting point? You can go back millions and millions of years, and finally you arrive to a starting point, and there, in every respect, with every religion, you have to confess, here is God. Here is the beginning. Here is the spirit of the universe, something which we do not understand. So if you deal with extraterrestrials, you never will lose your concept of God. I am still a deep believer in God. Now concerning these immaterial angels, which the gentleman just mentioned, at least in the old texts, and there is not only the Bible, they were not immaterial. They were material because they had sex with humans. Just read Moses' first book, 1:6, and then you realize what is written there. And I know old Indian texts. I know the book of Enoch. Enoch even quotes the names of 36 so-called fallen angels who all had sex with humans. Have sex means being material, not immaterial.
And why this obsession with humans to do this?
Well, because they are similar than we. That's a complicated story of panspermia. A section of our Milky Way is influenced with the same form of life. It all started before evolution started. When I was in high school, I still learned the story that in the beginning, in the Preluvian time, some atoms have put together to molecules. Molecules have can be more complicated molecules, and then finally life appeared. It was all a product of our own planetary system. In the meantime, scientists like Francis Crick, he is still a Nobel Prize winner, or Chandra Vikram Singh. Chandra Vikram Singh is a professor doctor in astrobiology at the University of Cardiff. And other scientists, they say, it's all wrong. Life did not start on our planet. Life has come from outside. The first information has come from outside our solar system. And again, this does not contradict. You just have the starting point from outside, and the rest is evolution. It's complicated, but it works perfectly. So, because we are the offsprings of another solar system, they had sex. They had the wishes of having sex. They have the same sexual apparatus as we are. They were not animals or flying elephants or whatever. They were completely human-like.
Let's go next to John in St. Louis, east of the Rockies. John, you're on with Eric Von Daniken. Go ahead.
Good evening. It was a great, nice to talk to you, George.
You too, John.
And Eric, it's a great honor. I read your book, Chariots of the Gods, I guess is one years ago. Very interesting. I think you have that you have some of it right, but I don't think all your conclusions are the only explanations. It's very interesting, very intriguing, and I think it does tie in with the Bible. You're right about interacting with the humans and so forth, but it's all the miracles that Jesus performed. He was predicted in the Old Testament, of course. And then how do you explain that the spiritual world, the physical world, but there's so much strong evidence, that he did stuff like calming the seas. When you defy the laws of physics, that's only possible if you wrote the laws of physics, if you were actually God, in fact, because you can't, raising people from the dead. All this strong circumstantial evidence leads to that and then when he came back, he ate something physical, yet he went through a wall. So he defied the laws of physics. How do you explain that?
Well, you see, the Jesus story has nothing to do with my extraterrestrials. The Jesus story, Jesus Christ was alive here and he was crucified because our humans did not understand nothing what he said and what he did. That was about 2,000 years ago in the past. But the stories with the extraterrestrials I talk about, that's about 14,000 years ago. It's not comparable. Now, concerning the Jesus story itself, it's a religion. It means believe into the Gospels. I know that the Gospels are not the real truths of what Jesus Christ said and did, because you simply have to understand how these Gospels were written. Long time after the death of Jesus Christ, there was a lot of human believing and the human talking inside these Gospels. The same thing happened, by the way, with other old literature. It's all made by humans, not by gods. But it has nothing to do with the extraterrestrial. The Jesus story is a story, believe it or not. I am educated as a Catholic, and I was believing everything which was about Jesus Christ, including the miracles. In the meantime, I don't believe it anymore. I have another opinion.
And that opinion is earth-shaking, isn't it, Eric?
Huh?
Your other opinions, they're pretty earth-shaking.
Of course. The other opinion is extraterrestrials were here some thousands of years ago. They influenced the humans, and they promised to return, and they will return again.
Were they responsible for the Noah flood?
Yes, they were, according at least to some of the traditions. Again, the book of Enoch. Enoch was one of the humans, and he was taken up into the sky, in my opinion, into a mother spaceship. There he learned the language of the extraterrestrials. Then he teaches the humans. He is sent down from the spaceship to the earth all the time. Then he knows the name of the extraterrestrials. And then he tells exactly that 36 of them had sex with the humans. But the commander of the spaceship didn't want this. It was forbidden to have sex with the humans. So the commander of the spaceship said to Enoch, go down again and tell to my mutterers that I will destroy this planet by a gigantic flood. And that was an announcement before the flood happened. By the way, in the Bible, you have the same situation. I mean, in the Bible, you have God. And God, of course, knows that the flood will arrive. And he gives order to Noah to construct an ark, a ship. So they knew it in advance. The God of the Bible even gave Noah the measurements of the ark, how long, how large, etc. Now, a real God, a God which is a spirit, an omnipotent, timeless God, does not need a ship, does not need measurements. The same story we have about the Congo Indians in today's Colombia, etc., etc. So, according all to these traditions, the great flood was made by someone, and they did it. And I can prove this case because we have the knowledge from the old texts.
Good for you. Eric, we're going to take a quick break in a second and come back with final phone calls for you right here on Coast to Coast AM. But when you're at Joshua Tree, you've got, 3 different speeches?
Yes, I have at least one main speech, and then I have workshops, etc. This, what we just mentioned, the great flood and the destruction.
Yeah.
How can we prove that somebody did it? Not coincidence. It was not the natural event. This, I will speak about it in Joshua Tree.
Very good, and I think you're going to be on one of my panels as well. We're going to take this quick break. Hey, don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, where we send out lots of information for you, and a great one coming your way in several weeks. So you can get all that by going to coasttocoastam.com. My email address is george@coasttocoastam.com as well, and we shall be right back in a moment with final phone calls with Mr. Eric Von Daniken on Coast to Coast AM. Well, next hour, we're going to tell you why so many incredibly successful people have succeeded. It's an interesting story, and you're going to be part of it on Coast to Coast AM. And we're going to come back in a moment with Eric Von Daniken. We're going to take final phone calls. And don't forget our television program, Beyond Belief. It is available for you for a trial period for 1 month for 99 cents. Simply go to beyondbelief.com. Well, welcome back. We've got Eric Von Daniken with us. We've got more calls than time, so let's go right to them. We'll go to Peter in Santa Monica, California, to get us started west of the Rockies. Hey, Peter, go ahead, sir.
Hi. I was going to basically say that when people pray to, say, Jesus or St. Michael the Archangel or to Mother Mary, for instance, they pray to them because they are like ascended beings who are working in the celestial realms. They are not physical. And now, so the point is, and then the extraterrestrials say they may be living in many different galaxies here throughout the universe, say, but still the ascended host or the celestial beings who are in heaven, they can come down and help all the different people throughout the entire universe. So I think that's the distinction that unless you have there are some people who are clairvoyant or who can read the Akashic records, and they can verify these kind of ideas. So I think but I'm sure a lot of your research is correct, though, on a lot of things you are doing. However, we should not, be starting to adore other physical people just because they live on a different planet. Then there are some good ones and there are some bad ones. So that's my only note of caution to your theory, basically.
What do you think of that, Eric, that there might be some bad ETs out there?
Why not? And of course he is right. There are celestial beings. They might be some things which we understand as spirits or nobody or immaterial. All this is possible. I would never exclude it. But at the same time, some thousands of years ago, these beings who were here were extraterrestrials from another solar system because they said themselves. They answer the question to the humans, and we have the literature. So both exist, celestial beings as physicals and celestial beings as non-physicals.
Michael's in Newport Beach, California now. Welcome to the program, Michael. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, hi, gentlemen. And
hey, Michael.
Love the topic and appreciate both your hard work. My question is, Eric, how do you tie together the realm of when you pass to the other side, and in just your thoughts on that? And I want to share. Let's just assume that that somebody had gone through the abduction phenomenon and the implants and all that. And at one point was shown a vision of that there would be like the Adronima strain, the little people coming out inside this little test tube, like on a conveyor belt. And the question would be, is that person a reproduction of the same person over and over, or is it a bunch of different people?
I don't know. I really can't answer these questions. I don't know.
I don't know either. It's good try though. It does make you think. There's no question about that.
Definitely, yes. It makes me think too.
What do you think of the theory that the ETs are creating hybrids, offspring, for some reason? And if that's true,
I read about this, and I have difficulties to believe it, but I would never exclude it, because some eyewitness, and not only one person, some eyewitness from different continents showed and explained the same experience. So I'm in a conflict. Should I take this as serious, as true, or is it just the wish or the imagination? Well, if they do something like hybrids, then maybe we have to be afraid. Will they take over our planet one day, or are some of these hybrids already living among us? I don't have the answer.
Let's go to Blair in Sedona, Arizona. It's been a while, Blair. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, George. I really love your show. And Mr. Von Daniken, I read your Chariots of the Gods back in 1971, and it opened my eyes. And when you mentioned the Spanish conquistadors were mistaken as gods by some South American civilizations, could some ancient terrestrial civilizations, like, say, Atlantis, I'm thinking of Fingerprints of the Gods by Graham Hancock, where he says under Antarctica ice is Atlantis right now, had similar misidentifications as extraterrestrial, while all it was an advanced terrestrial society that mastered jet and rocket technology, just like the good old U.S. of A. has done, and traveled across the oceans and continents?
You cannot exclude this possibility. I am very familiar with the story of Atlantis, where the original was handed down by Plato and the Greek philosophers. And I know the story, and I'm a believer in Atlantis. Atlantis did definitely exist. And Atlantis was founded by one of the sons of the gods of Poseidon. So he was again an extraterrestrial. And he founded Atlantis because he wanted to protect his family. Plato, what was the name of his wife, etc., etc. So I do not exclude that we had a higher civilization, maybe some thousands and thousands of years in the past. And it might well be that such a higher civilization one day disappeared with the spaceship. And then they returned after some thousands of years on Earth, and our Earthlings were primitive again. Maybe they fall back to the Ice Age, and they saw these spaceships. And they asked them, where do you come from? Well, we come from the sky. It's true they came from the sky, but at the same time, they were Earthlings. So you cannot exclude this possibility. In the scientific community, you would never accept this solution, because they say, if we would have had a high civilization on Earth, such a high civilization would have needed metal, raw material, all kind of energy sorts taken out from the Earth. But there is nothing, there is no proof that some high society used our raw material, our sources, etc. So they deny this possibility. I would not exclude it. But at the same time, we can have both possibilities. We could have a high civilization in the past, and at the same time, this high civilization had a visit from outer space. Both is possible. It's not neither or the other. All is possible.
Eric, could there be a plan for the ETs to take over this planet and to eliminate us?
Yeah, that is thinkable. I don't like it.
I don't like it.
It is thinkable, yes.
Possible?
Yeah, possible. But I don't hope so. You see, in the past, read the old historians. I mean, old historians, I mean those people who were writing books some 2,000 years ago, like the Greek Herodotus, like Strabon, Plutarch, Diodor from Sicily. All these people have written stories some 2,000 more years ago. And they all say the gods at that time were helping gods. They teach the human. They teach them in all kinds of sciences, including astronomy, etc. So these so-called gods in the past, they were not destroying the earth. They could have done it any time. Also in the past, the decades, if some extraterrestrial society would have a reason to destroy us, they just have to influence our planet with some virus, and then we are dead. So I don't think that this is the solution, that they won't destroy us. In the past, definitely not. And in the present, I don't think either. But a mixture between them and us is possible.
Eric, any idea of their propulsion system? Are they going through wormholes? How are they traveling?
No, we don't know. In Joshua Tree, I will explain how it is possible to travel without science fiction possibilities, without holes in the universe, and without changing the dimensions. It is possible to do it in a primitive way, but that's another story. About their technology, we have no idea. They must have had a technology which is far ahead of our technology, because we have simple, today's stupid rockets with the liquid fuel. With liquid fuel, you could never reach the stars. They must have completely other propulsion systems. We don't know what.
Let's go to Frank in Dothan, Alabama. Hey, Frank, thank you for calling. Go ahead.
Hello, Frank.
Frank, you with us?
Mr. Von Daniken, I really appreciate you taking the call.
I hear you. Thank you.
I had two quick questions, but this isn't one of them. Is there any opportunity to maybe meet you somewhere on the East Coast, somewhere in the near future, at a book signing or whatever? And,
yes.
And my
other
George,
you have to explain this. You do it with your words better than I do it.
Okay. And my question was, there's throughout history, like every generation, there's always a handful of geniuses on the planet that, these kids that are 8 years old and graduating from Harvard. Do you think that they're direct descendants or possibly just purebred aliens? And the second one is whatever you know about ley lines. And I'll take the answer off the air. Thank you.
Well, that's many questions. Concerning ley lines, they definitely exist. We have ley lines crossing all over Europe for thousands of kilometers. And these ley lines are just not there by coincidence. For example, it's not the way as just take a map and then take a pencil and make a line of it. And these line crosses by coincidence some villages. No, because all these places are old places which you find prehistoric monuments, like stone circles, tombs, graves, etc. And all the places have the same name, which is absolutely exclude the possibility of coincidence. But about this I will talk in Joshua Tree too. Now, concerning where will I be, Joshua Tree in California has a big conference, and I will be there. Of course, I have signing sessions. Of course, I have workshops, and you will meet me in person. And what was the third point he wants to?
Well, we're talking generally about just these extraterrestrial visitations, and they seem to be
he was asking about the children.
In the
in
offspring.
Antiquity again, we had some artificial mutation. You can prove this. A short example, everyone knows Noah. Noah, the survivor of the Great Flood. Now, Noah had a father. His father was Lamech. According to the Dead Sea Scrolls, Lamech was one of the rich shepherds in his times. One day, Lamech, after some months, comes back to his home tents, and he finds that his wife, her name was Batenosh, had just given birth to a child. The child was different than the other children which Lamech had, different in color and different in their hair. Now Lamech said to his wife Batenosh, "It is impossible that this child is my child.
Oh boy.
I was too long away, too many months I was away with my sheep. So who made you pregnant?" And now Batenosh swears, "Dear father Lamech, I swear you nobody touched me sexually." She even says, "Not even another shepherd or another soldier, whatever." Now Lamech is confused. He loves his wife Batenosh. He goes and asks his own father. His name was Methuselah, the Methuselah in the Bible, and tell him the story. Methuselah again doesn't know what to do, and he goes to his father. His father is the biblical Enoch, the seventh patriarch before the Great Flood. The same Enoch which is in contact with extraterrestrials, the same Enoch which later disappears in a fiery chariot into the sky. Now, Enoch says to his son Methuselah, go to your son Lamech, tell him that the guardians of the sky have inseminated Batenosh without touching her sexually. Lamech should accept this boy as his own, because the guardians of the sky, would create a great flood, and the earth would be destroyed. But this boy would be the survivor of the great flood. He should give them the name of Noah. So in that example, you have a case where an artificial insemination took place. Now we humans, we are descendants of Noah after the great flood. That means we all must have extraterrestrial genes somewhere in our genome.
Next up, Roger's in Shingletown, California, first-time caller. Hey, Raj, go ahead.
Yes, hello.
Hi there.
Hi. Sir, I remember reading you when I was in college, and that was a few years ago. But
Me
this
too.
is absolutely incredible to be able to talk to you. You have influenced the way of the way people think, and it's the first time in my life I've ever talked to someone of your stature. The one thing is I've studied language. I speak a few languages. I've studied Sanskrit and I've studied Hindi. And Sanskrit has 48 consonants and 11 vowels. And then you times that with merged consonants and regular consonants, and you've got 462 characters. In English, we've got 26 and 5. So that was invented 6,000 years ago. The complexity of the language is so mathematical, it's amazing how these things fit together and form language. It's a mathematical equation. It's not a language the way it's put together, and Sanskrit is the basis for all languages. So could you comment on the ethnology of these ancient languages and how this affects this theory?
No, because I cannot read Sanskrit, but I have wonderful professors in Sanskrit who really are specialists, like Professor Dr. Dinlep Kanjilal from the Sanskrit College in Calcutta. And he has published books about the influence of aliens some thousands of years ago. And in one of his books, he says something similar what you say. Where did the Sanskrit language come from? Exactly as you just suggested, it has a mathematical base behind it. But as Eric von Däniken, I have never studied. I simply say what other Sanskrit college professors told me.
It is remarkable what those writings show about our past, Eric.
It is absolutely sensational. And it is time that some of our scientific community makes a big conference to discuss about these things. You know, one is a specialist in Sumerology, another of the professors is a specialist in Maya culture, another is a specialist in Hindu or Sanskrit culture. What we need is something like a world conference where an open mind, in a scientific, calm and sober way, without accusation or whatever, we discuss these things. And there will be a new way of thinking in our world.
Let's go to Ray in Niles, Ohio now. Ray, thanks for holding. Go ahead.
Hi, George and Eric. I got two real quick questions.
Sure.
First, if battle in heaven was just a battle in space, if that's the ancient astronaut version, what is the ancient astronaut version of hell? And when Jesus speaks about hell, where is that, and what kind of place is that? That's my first question.
We were talking about Zachariah Sitchin's translations of the Sumerian cuneiform earlier in the show. Now, Zachariah says that some of these extraterrestrials used some of the human race as slaves. We had to work for them, and we had to work in a terrible way. We were suffering, and that suffering went into mythology as hell, as a place of unhappiness.
When Jesus speaks of that as being eternal, is he just lying, or doesn't know what he's talking about? Or
No. Jesus is not lying, of course not. But all the Gospels were not written in the time of Jesus. They were all not written by eyewitness. This is a misunderstanding in Christianity. The Gospels were written much later, and among the Gospels, they are full of influence from outside. So I don't think that Jesus himself said these things. It's in the Gospels, but it's not the words of Jesus.
Eric, I look forward to seeing you in Joshua Tree in a few weeks, my friend. Eric Von Daniken, Chariot of the Gods, and all his other works, with his website, of course, linked up at coasttocoastam.com. He's been live in Switzerland, but if you want to find out where he's going to be, for example, Joshua Tree, the end of May, that's in California. He's going to be in Australia in July. He's going to be in Brazil and Peru in August. He's going to be in Turkey in September. He's going to be at Edgar Casey's Virginia Beach ARE event in October. And then he's going to lecture in Europe in November and December. He just doesn't stop. I'm George Norrie, back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Why do so many successful people succeed? What do they do? Well, in a moment, Dean Slider joins us. We'll talk about his work. It's called Natural Meditation, a guide to effortless meditative practice. But there's much more to this story when we come right back. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Dean Slider has taught meditation and led workshops and retreats throughout the country back since 1970. He's from Ivy League colleges to maximum security prisons. He has done his work. His latest work is called Natural Meditation, and he has been featured in magazines called Prevention. You've heard of that, Family Circle. And here he is on Coast to Coast. Dean, I'm looking forward to this. How are you, sir?
I'm great. How you doing?
Good. Tell me a little bit more about yourself and how you got involved in meditation.
Well, my involvement really goes all the way back to childhood. I heard you telling a story on line the other day about when in your childhood when you were involved with the Fran playing with model rockets.
Oh, I loved it. Yep.
And right from the beginning, you were the guy who was counting down. You were announcing. And, in a way, everything you're doing now was contained in that. You were the voice that was narrating, exploring outer space. Now, for me, one of my earliest memories is when I was about maybe 4 years old, before I could read. I was with my mom. She was visiting a friend, and they were having some boring grown-up conversation. So I wandered over to the bookcase or the coffee table, and I found a book. I opened it up, and there was a picture of a guy sitting in a cross-legged pose in meditation. And the words that went through my head were, "That's me." I just knew somehow that this was the thing that I was supposed to do.
But you had never done that at that time.
No, I was 4 or 5 years old.
Just a little guy.
Right. And then other things came along. When I was 12, you hear these stories about people having these experiences of sudden awakening. They might meet the guru, meet the holy man, or, some great flash comes out of the sky and things open up for them. For me, it happened when I was 12 years old, and we were getting ready to go to a drive-in movie. My mom sent me out to clear all the junk. My brothers and I had all our comic books and toys in the back seat of the old Nash Rambler station wagon. You may remember.
I sure do. With the wood panels.
We didn't have the wood.
You didn't have the wood. You didn't have that option.
We weren't that cool. So I go out there, and my mind, because my mind was always racing, even at that age of 12, always going around and around trying to figure things out, and very kind of hyperactive sort of mind. And the next thing I pick up is a Mad magazine. And remember, every issue of Mad probably still does have on the cover a picture of their grinning idiot mascot, Alfred E. Newman.
That's right there, the little redhead with the freckles.
With the freckles and the gap teeth and the protruding ears and a completely silly grin. And underneath that was his slogan, "What? Me worry?"
That's
right. And all of a sudden, my mind just stopped. And I realized, this thing my mind has been doing, this going around like on a squirrel cage, this is called worrying. And somehow, on some level, I've been choosing to do this all along, and so I can choose to stop. And I stopped, and later on, years later, I read about the kind of experience that I had next, and they say, oh, this is samadhi or kensho, a glimpse of nirvana, this opening up into a zone of just complete peace, complete expansiveness, just a deep, deep, total realization that somehow everything is infinitely okay for no particular reason. And it's, it's not an idea, it's not a belief, it's not a religion or a philosophy, it's an experience. And what I later learned is that there are people who have developed methods over the centuries, meditative methods, for getting back to that in a deliberate way, not just having it happen by accident out of the blue once in a while, and eventually for staying there 24/7.
Well, I was going to say, there are different ways to meditate, aren't there?
Right. And in my book, I talk about different methods. One of the first methods I introduce is meditating on a single breath. Doesn't have to be necessarily following your breath for an hour. It could be while you're sitting at a red light, and instead of sitting there stressing and you know that thing where you're sitting at the red light and you're in a hurry and you're trying to make the red light turn green faster,
and it just never happens.
It never happens. And here's some really good news. For the rest of your life, it will never, ever happen. I personally guarantee it. And the reason that that's good news is it means you can let that sucker go.
That's right.
And just breathe in and experience
and
that.
Chill.
And chill. And breathe out. And then the chilling happens.
What is it about the meditation, whether you're sitting down in that kind of sitting posture that you saw when you were 4, or just, lying on a couch, or just simply thinking? What is it about meditation that seems to work?
What seems to work is letting gravity take over. And what I mean by that is, on the cover of my book, there's a picture of a feather that has just been floating out of the sky and is just about to settle to the earth. Now, when a feather falls out of the sky, gravity guarantees that eventually it's going to hit the ground. And we don't have to monitor it. We don't have to If we try to monitor it, we say, oh man, it's not going down, it's drifting to the left. Yeah. Now it's drifting to the right. Why is it doing that? Yeah. And that's the way most people approach meditation, or what they think it is. I have to drive the process. I have to control it. And that winds up being counterproductive. So that's why the title of the book is Natural Meditation. We let the nature of the mind, which is to gravitate toward that sense of inner peace, that sense of wholeness, that sense of infinite okayness. And just by gently getting the mind turned in that direction through something like directing it to the breath, or in subsequent chapters in the book, I talk about using a sound like a mantra, using the vision of the open sky, as a lot of the meditators do in Tibetan tradition, and then just letting go, letting mom drive, and you just relax in the passenger seat.
You have talked about how successful people, and the definition of success to me is somebody who has some notoriety, maybe some extreme wealth, but successful people that you can gauge, that they all seem to meditate.
Well, a whole lot of them do. For instance, the manager of the most successful hedge fund in the world, which is Bridgewater Associates, Ray Dalio, who's personally worth upwards of $13 billion, he's been practicing meditation for 42 years. The winningest basketball coach in the NBA history, I believe, is Phil Jackson. I don't think a lot of people will argue with that. He's been a very serious Zen practitioner for decades, and he gives all his players meditation training. He shows them how to sit. He shows them how to breathe. He does all kinds of meditative exercises, like having them practice in a dark room. The list goes on and on. One of my favorite examples is the head of Aetna Insurance, Mark Bertolini. And he did, unlike Dalio and Phil Jackson, he did not have a long history of meditative practice. He was an up-and-coming executive at Aetna when he had a near-death experience. He had a terrible ski accident that messed up to this day. He still has chronic pain in one arm, and they thought he was going to die. He pulled out of it, and he realized that he had to change his life because now the doctors were putting him on all kinds of drugs that were, not having good results and having a lot of bad side effects.
Backfired on him.
Yeah, exactly. And so he started looking into yoga and then meditation, and he went, wow, this stuff was so great that the next step was he started offering free yoga and meditation classes to all the Aetna employees. So far, over 13,000 of his workers have participated. And what they found out at the end of the year when their, bean counters started looking at the, you can imagine insurance companies are very good at keeping statistics, and they found that their productivity per worker shot way up. The amount of sick compensation for their own workers went down. So then they started developing programs to offer to the other companies that they were handling insurance for.
What are we tapping into when we're in the meditative state? This, as I call this, wireless connection that's out there in the universe? What are we doing?
Yeah. I think the important thing to point out is that we're not creating something that wasn't there before. I think tapping in is exactly the right word. It's what was, all the great sages, whether it's, the Buddha or Jesus or the Baal Shem Tov in Jewish mystical tradition, all the Socrates, Lao Tzu, in different language, they've all said it's inside you already.
Yes,
Jesus
I believe that.
The kingdom of heaven is within you. Not could be someday if you're really good or might be generated if you work really hard at it, is within you. So it's really just a matter of turning within, using one of these simple methods for turning the attention within, and then just letting go and letting gravity take over.
Does it do something to the brain when you meditate?
Oh, yeah, it does a lot. There's been a lot of research. Almost every week you read a new research study, and there is more and more coming out. For example, it's, here we go. One study at Yale found that something called the default mode network, the DMN, which is the brain network that keeps the mind chattering all the time. Turns out that the activity of the default mode network, that goes way down during meditation. That is what keeps us worrying about the past and future instead of just chilling in the present. So that goes way down. There have been studies showing that the effects of meditation for treating depression and anxiety are measurably about as good as antidepressants, obviously without any of the side effects. There's been studies showing that the cortical thickness in the hippocampus, which is the part of the brain that governs learning and memory, that becomes thicker. Meanwhile, there's a decrease in the brain cell volume in the amygdala, which is responsible for fear, anxiety, and stress. It goes on and on like that.
Did you go through this via trial and error to find the best techniques?
I did. Not trial and error in the sense of making stuff up myself, but trial and error in the sense of trying out which teachings would work for me. I started off as a Zen student, very briefly. I didn't last a week because in Zen training, at least the way it was presented to me, you have to sit like a rock. If your nose itches, you're not allowed to.
You can't scratch it. Jeez.
Right.
If a fly lands on your nose, you can't swat it.
Yeah, you tough it out. And for a lot of Zen practitioners, it becomes like a macho thing, like who can sit motionless the longest.
Can you blink your eyes? I guess your eyes are closed.
Yeah,
right?
Your eyes are closed or downcast usually in Zen practice. They're like 3/4 closed. And your mind is supposed to follow the same model as the body. The mind is supposed to be concentrated, stock still. Now, I couldn't do any of that. As I said, I had this hyperactive mind and a fidgety body. I couldn't hack the Zen thing, and so I got kicked out of that nest after a couple of days, and that turned out to be really a blessing because I had to look around and find, what I call in the book, meditation for the rest of us. Meditation that people who are not cut out to be stone Buddhas can do. So I found teachings. I spent a lot of years with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. You remember, he's the one who brought transcendental meditation around the world, famously involved with the Beatles for a while.
I remember that.
And
I thought the Beatles had lost it when that was going on.
Yeah, well, a lot of people thought that, and then slowly they've come around.
Yeah.
So I wound up learning transcendental meditation, and what Maharishi was really brilliant at was conveying this essence of effortlessness. Now, his particular method involved effortlessly using a mantra. That is a short, smooth, mellifluous sound, something smooth, like we could say, like a river pebble, that is just really suited to sort of melting in your mind the way a cough drop melts in your mouth. And that turns out to be a very effective technique. And I actually was a TM teacher, an official TM teacher for a lot of years. Eventually that became more trial and error for me because the organization started going in some directions that were different from what I had in mind. They started charging what I thought was too much money for people.
Right.
I've always thought, this is for the people. And so I moved on and found that there were teachers in the Tibetan tradition and teachers in what's called the Advaita Vedanta tradition of India who had that same essence of effortlessness.
Have you found that people who practice meditation, Dean, are more intuitive or have more psychic abilities?
Oh, yeah. No, I see that all the time. I see it in my own life in very kind of everyday ways. What I find as I continue to meditate over the years is I can think less and feel more. And when I say feel, I don't mean that I make my decisions based on some impulse or emotion, but literally, when you feel textures, you can feel that when you're looking for the direction to go, you can feel that, like, when you think about going one way, it sort of feels thick, and then when you think, like blocked there, and then when you put your attention in the other direction, it feels like there's the opening. I compare it to Michael Jordan in the golden age of the Chicago Bulls, where he would be rushing the net. There'd be 5 guys defending the net, and he would find the path, the opening through the defenders like a nanosecond before that path opened up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, you can't think your way through that. You can't calculate that fast.
And everything would look in slow motion to him.
Exactly. So he's doing that on the level of feeling. Same thing with great jazz musicians. I play a little bit of music, and to me, one of the most blissful things you can do is to play music and where you go into, as they say, that zone where you're not thinking, okay, now I'm in the key of G, and now we're going to the 4, we're playing in the C, where it just flows, and you don't know how you know which note to play next, but it just happens, and it's great. And more, as I continue to meditate, I find that my life is being lived on that level.
We're going to take this quick break, Dean, and we're going to come back and chat more with you about that. I'd like to know how some of this ties into thoughts about extraterrestrial life as well. We'll talk about all this and meditation and much more. Dean's website, linked up for you at coasttocoastam.com. We're talking about his latest work called Natural Meditation. I'm George Norrie, and we'll be back with you in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Well, if you're looking for something to do in the first Saturday of June and you want to come to Canada and you have a passport, or if you're already in Canada, you won't need one, just come and see me in Vancouver at a major event. Full details at the highlight reel at coasttocoastam.com. And welcome back to Coast. Dean Slider with us, his book, Natural Meditation. Dean, you've talked about the ancients and how they developed their techniques of meditation. Who taught them?
Well, they all have legends about that. You know, they generally, there's some point where most of those traditions have what they call a lineage, okay, and sometimes they will even recite that as like a ritual invocation. This guy was taught by this guy, was taught by this guy, was taught by this guy, and at some point it starts to recede out of actual recorded history into what seems more like the mists of legend, and the first few people in the lineage, you know, are not necessarily humans. They're more like some kind of deities.
But when they were able to develop these techniques, I mean, was there a right way or a wrong way?
Well, it was, as far as I can tell, they were also doing trial and error. The picture seems to be that we had yogis going out into the jungles in India, literally sitting in caves. I know that's become kind of a cliche. You'll see that in a New Yorker cartoon, but really, guys sat in caves, and I've been in India and sat in a couple of those caves where you're completely in just total darkness, total silence, confronting, there's nothing there but your own mind. And you're really you're under the microscope there and really finding out how your mind works. And evidently these people they tried different things. Okay, what if I concentrate on this? What if I focus on that? Oh, what if I let go a little bit more? And ultimately what they found out was what works.
So have you found that this is a science? That is meditation a science?
Yeah, in the sense that it's repeatable. You know, different people can do pretty much the same thing and get pretty much the same results. In that sense, yeah, it's a science. In another sense, it's an art because it's more flowing, it's more fluid, because situations are always changing. I don't always sit down and practice in exactly the same way. Sometimes I feel that, okay, I need to start with some deep breathing and just follow my breath in and follow the breath out for a little while, and then let go of that, and then just be, just hang out in that inner space of silence. Sometimes, depending on what's going on in my nervous system, what's been going on in my life, I might enter into the practice in a different way. I might start by just kind of looking around the room or looking out the window at the sky and letting my gaze, as the Tibetans describe it, letting your gaze dissolve into the sky, mingle with the sky, and then settle in from that. So you do develop in a little bit more an artist's way, more of a subjective sense of, no, we're not just going by the numbers. We're not just coloring in the lines.
So tell us a little bit, if you would, about these forms of meditation and what you did in a prison with this stuff.
Yeah, I started in 2005 going in one night a week as a volunteer in Northern State Prison in Newark, New Jersey, which is considered the roughest prison in New Jersey. And I went in every Thursday night for the next several years until I moved out here to California. Now I go a few times a year whenever I go back east. But my guys continue to meet. And in fact, my old students now are teaching the new students, which is really great. And I'll tell you, working in the prison with those guys was one of the most inspiring things that's happened in my life. I learned so much from them. For example, in our, what they call the chapel, which is really just this grim, bare, cinder block bunker, there are these giant speakers right over our heads where we sit. And we could be sitting there meditating, and maybe in the course of a 20, 30-minute meditation, maybe 3 times, maybe 6 times, announcements come over the speakers. And it's really loud. It rattles your bones. Attention all areas, attention all units, last call for medication, last call for medication.
Yeah.
And what's great about it is that there's no escape from it. You know, when I'm teaching a workshop in the suburbs where people have nice, comfy life, I'll lead a meditation at the end. I'll ask people about it, and they might say, well, it was really nice except for, when that dog was barking a block away. In the suburbs, we feel that we have the luxury of changing things. These guys just know they live a life where there's all this stuff that you cannot change. And just like, in that serenity prayer, you have the wisdom to know the difference, know which things you can't change, and the serenity to accept them. So my guys sit there, the speakers have the announcements blasting over them, and they are unfazed.
Did you feel awkward there?
No. At first, the first time that I went in there, and actually a former student of mine was going in with me for the first year, and the first time we went in there were 3 guys that showed up to our first meeting. Eventually, guys kept bringing other guys. We got up to about 24 of them. And so that first meeting, of the 3 guys that showed up, 2 of them were, I think they were high. And by the way, in case you've heard that it's really easy to get drugs in prison, it's true.
It is true, of course.
Yeah, it is true. I once asked the guys, is it true you can get any drug you want in prison? And they laughed at me for asking such a silly question. And so the 2 guys were kind of high, were kind of confused. The third guy was really serious. He'd been reading books about Zen. He actually had been practicing at another prison. Very serious, very educated, clearly, an articulate guy, seemed to have everything going for him. And afterwards, when Ed, the friend that I was teaching with, when he and I left and we were walking out through the parking lot, we were saying to each other, how does a guy like that wind up in here? And we decided, well, he must be one of these nonviolent drug offenders that you hear about getting locked up that really don't belong behind bars.
Right, and there are a lot of those in prison.
Yeah, and there are a lot of those. But in this case, when I got home, I knew that the New Jersey Department of Corrections keeps a website, and anyone can go into the website, and there's a page for every offender.
Really?
Yeah, it's all public.
Man, the
records.
Internet's got everything.
It sure does. There's his mug shot, there's his rap sheet, there are his aliases, there's his possible release dates and so forth. So I looked up this guy to see what his nonviolent drug offense was, and it was armed robbery and murder.
Wow.
And then I said, well, I'm not going to look up anyone else. They don't know what I've done in this life. I haven't lived a perfect life. I don't think it's fair that I'm snooping around seeing what they've done. Well, we'll just, be together in the moment. And we did that, and it was great. But, that question was still in the back of my head. How does a guy like that wind up doing those things? Now, 5 years pass, and one night in our meeting, the guys got me telling stories about the 60s, my hippie days when I was, I was a hippie in the Haight-Ashbury, and I was hitchhiking around the country and riding freight trains with the hobos, and, they were enjoying these stories. Afterward, as we're walking out, this guy comes up to me and he says, the first time I went hitchhiking, I was 15 years old. That's when I ran away from home after my dad raped both of my sisters.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. And
he had every reason to run away.
Yeah. And you go, okay, my jaw dropped. I'm standing there in the middle of the chapel trying not to cry, and I'm just thinking, geez, just some people don't have a chance. I had another guy who witnessed his first murder on the streets of Newark at the age of 7. Every day he would go to the street corner where the friendly local drug dealer would hand him $1 so he could run to the candy store and buy candy. And as the dealer is handing him $1, the drive-by shooting takes place and the dealer is whacked. And little 7-year-old kid gets blood all over him. Now, what kind of chance do you have in life with that?
And so with meditation, you can fix that?
Well, I'll tell you, in the case of this guy, the first time he came in, and he went on to become what he described as a drug gang assassin on the streets of Newark.
He did?
He did. That's how he described himself.
Huh.
So he came in for the first time after our meetings had been going on for a few months. And the first time he came in, a friend brought him in, and I saw him come in, and his eyes were like, hooded, where you're looking out from under your eyelids like, what the hell is this? Just like coiled. He was like a coiled spring. And I noticed his tattoos. One of his tattoos said, "In me I trust." And, that was his whole philosophy.
That was
right
it.
there.
Just himself.
Just himself. And he later on told me he never trusted his mother. He never trusted his father. Nobody. So he was just this coiled spring, but he sat through the meditation. The next week, the next Thursday night, he came back, and I could see he looked a little bit softened around the edges. He sat through the meditation. Next Thursday, he came back again, and he was starting to look pretty relaxed.
Now, was he meditating before he would come in?
No. This was his introduction to it.
This was it. But, I mean, when he left, prior to coming back the following week, did he practice?
Yeah, he'd been doing some practice on his own in his cell. And after about a month, he took my teaching partner, Ed, aside, and he said two things to him. One is, okay, I've never trusted anyone. I never trusted my mother or my father, but I trust you guys.
That's huge.
Yeah, that's huge. And
coming
also, that's when you think, we better do this right.
Yeah.
And the other thing that he said to Ed was, how do you purify murder?
That was an interesting question.
It sure is. But the fact is, he was asking that question. Now, I went on...
What was the answer?
I don't know what Ed told him, but we just went on doing practices. I was doing a lot with them with certain practices from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. One of them involves it's actually a purification meditation. That it's a very rich visualization that involves enlightenment in the form of like pure, brilliant. It's like a fluid. It's the color of fresh snow in brilliant sunshine, and you visualize this stuff coursing down through you and just pushing out all your old bad karmas and all your ailments and all the crap, pushing it out and just leaving you completely purified. But the one catch is that to do that practice, according to the tradition, you have to first swear that you will, to yourself, that you'll never repeat the offense on pain of death.
Mm.
So that's some serious
It's an
stuff.
affirmation, isn't it?
It is an affirmation. Now, what eventually happened with this guy was when I left for California, when I moved, they did not replace me. They said they couldn't find someone suitable to replace me, so they had the guys run their own group. And they had this guy who had become now such a model meditator and such a model prisoner, they had him become the leader of the group. And he started writing me letters. I got one letter from him in California with a photocopy of his, what is it called, the GED?
GED. It's the high school diploma equivalent.
Exactly. And he sent me a photocopy of it, and he was so proud. He said, I wanted you to be the first one to see this. He said, I taught myself to read and write here in prison because I wanted to read the books that you talked about.
I wonder if he showed any remorse for what he did.
I know that he did. I mean, we've talked about it. I'll tell you something else he did. He had, at the time, he wore his hair in long cornrows. And one day I got another letter from him. It was like a package, and I felt it, it's like one of those big flat envelopes, but it felt kind of lumpy. And I opened it up.
His cornrows.
It was his hair with a letter saying, please donate this to Locks of Love.
Wow. You changed his life.
I was on the phone.
Even though he's in for life, isn't he?
No. He's out now.
Oh, he is out.
He is out.
You mean
now.
he murdered and got out?
Yes, sometimes it happens.
Jeez.
Sometimes it happens. But he was on the phone with me just recently, and he said, and I was saying, gee, I hope we really accomplished something there. And he said, Dean, you made killers peaceful.
Wow.
So, yeah, and I said, I didn't do it. I'm there to midwife the process, but you can only, this is what we were talking about before, you can only reach into what's inside you. But the good news, again, according to all the great sages, is that no matter what you have done, you're not hopeless. No one is beyond hope. That there is this ultimate place inside yourself that's not touched by anything. That's beyond all your conditioning. It's beyond all your vices. It's even beyond all your virtues. Actually, we used to talk a lot in our group about Milarepa. Milarepa is one of the great Enlightenment heroes in the Tibetan tradition, and he started off as a murderer. He was a serial killer, and one day he realized the errors of his ways, and he went off above the snow line and lived in a cave, and he became just the model meditator of Tibet.
You also talk about meditation and dying, and you say it's easier to die if you know meditation. Explain that.
Oh, absolutely. In one sense, meditation is dying practice because it's a process of letting go. It's a process of letting go. One sage was once asked, what is dying like? And he said, it's like taking off a tight shoe, which is a beautiful poetic description.
It's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah, he said it's like and actually, I read that to my mom when my mom was on her deathbed. She was dying of breast cancer, and I read this to her where this guy said, yeah, dying is like taking off a tight shoe. And she sat up in bed and she said, or a girdle.
Huh.
So meditation is also like taking off a tight shoe. We're constricted most of the time. There's a kind of claustrophobia in the way we're caught up in our thoughts, in our circumstances. We get up in the morning, and it's like, okay, here's all these circumstances of our life. We're relating to these people. We're going off to this job. We've got these attitudes. It's like we're closed in to the shape of all the particularities of our life. Now, when you meditate, you just settle down. You don't have to get rid of those things. You don't have to annihilate any of them, but you just settle down. We were talking before about being in the dark, silent cave. Well, the real dark, silent cave is inside you. And when you settle down into that inner cave, all that stuff goes away.
How long do you have to meditate for to be effective?
Well,
can it be minutes?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be for hours and hours. For a lot of people, what I tell them is it's better to meditate for 1 minute every day than say, okay, I'm going to do 45 minutes each time, and then, that's too long, and then you wind up not getting around to it. Well, when am I going to get 45 minutes? For a lot of people, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, something like that. The best thing that I ever did, one of the best things I ever did, was I threw the clock out of my meditation space.
That's smart.
So that I'm not thinking about it. So people ask me, how long should I meditate? I say, meditate for a while. And
you get that feeling that you're finished, don't you?
Yeah, you do. You get a feeling like, okay, stick a fork in me, I'm done.
We're going to take calls with you, Dean, when we come back. And also, I'd like you to share stories with us. If you've gone into some kind of meditation, how did it work for you? Fascinating meditation. Dean Sluyter, our special guest, his work, Natural Meditation. And we're going to come back and take your phone calls and your stories in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Okay, welcome back to our final hour with Dean Sluyter. Dean, your book, Natural Meditation, available all over the place for people?
Yep, it's available in bookstores. It's available on Amazon and the other onlines. Also, it's available as a Kindle book and as an audio book narrated by yours truly. And some people particularly like the audio book because in several the chapters, I walk you through meditative practices, and that's particularly effective in the audio version.
Reincarnation. Are you a believer in that?
You know, I wouldn't put it in terms of belief as if, that's a doctrine that I subscribe to, but because of certain things that I've experienced, I'm inclined to feel that that's the way things work, that, we're smart enough to recycle our cans and bottles. I think the universe is smart enough to recycle us, so that, the kind of within the context of meditation, what that's about is that we think of ourselves as something very limited. We were talking before about that feeling of claustrophobia, being hemmed in by being a particular being in a particular shape in particular circumstances. That's like being a wave on the ocean. And you think, okay, I'm this wave, and it's so limiting. There's all those other waves, and look, that wave there is bigger than me. That one's got bigger muscles. That one's got more money. It's very frustrating, the smallness of our lives, and also the fact that we keep looking. All those other waves. Eventually, every wave crashes against the shore and disappears. In other words, everyone dies. But what happens is, after a wave crashes against the shore, that water washes back out again in the undertow and comes up again as another wave. And what I think happens, my sense of it, and this is supported by the traditional teachings, and again, as I say, by some hints I've had in my own life, that you keep doing that until eventually you realize through your direct experience, I'm not a wave at all. I'm the ocean. I'm the vastness. I am unlimited beingness, which happens to express itself through the form of this limitless being. And at that point, you've graduated. Then you don't have to come back anymore.
How many days do you have to meditate in order to be effective?
How many days?
Days, yeah. Every day of the week, 3 days a week?
I think it's best to do it every day. As I said before, even for a minute. It seems to me, my sense of it, and again, from teaching this to thousands of people over the years, that if you take a person and he spends or she spends 24 hours a day being caught up in stuff, caught up in the limitations of their lives, caught up in the stresses and the demands, caught up in thinking about the past and thinking about the future. 24 hours a day. Now, you take that same person, and instead of having them caught up for 24 hours, they're caught up for 23 hours and 59 minutes.
Yeah.
Just that 1 minute to let go. And I think that's a world of difference.
Let's go to the phones now as they line up. Wesley is in Ocean Grove, New Jersey. Wes, welcome to the program. You're up with us.
Had a question if you had done any work with Kriya Yoga. This was taught by Paramahansa Yogananda, and it's a technique where you do a Kriya. It's a breathing exercise. It directs energy up through the spine, up to the brain, and then back down the spine again. It takes about a half a minute to a minute to do each one, up to a maximum of 108 a day. And I estimated that if you did that every day for 27 years, you would eventually reach what they call samadhi. According to the Bhagavad Gita, I make no evaluation as to its reliability. The universe is an illusion, and you continue to reincarnate until you break the illusion through the practice of yoga. I wondered if you had done any work with this and what the result would be in contrast to the other methods which you have not really described.
Right. I have not practiced Kriya Yoga specifically. I've had a little bit of experience with some somewhat similar methods. And Paramahansa Yogananda was one of the great pioneers in bringing these teachings to the United States. In fact, some friends of mine made a beautiful documentary film about him called Awake, which I urge people to see. I think it's going to become available everywhere very soon. So he was a wonderful teacher, and his book, Autobiography of a Yogi, was the beginning point for a lot of people's meditative quest. But I don't think it fits into anyone's formula, to say, okay, if you do this many repetitions of this particular exercise for this many days, it adds up to that, bingo, that gets you to enlightenment. That's a model, and all the traditions to some degree present some sort of model like that, but that doesn't mean, some traditions, they say, you've got to sit on a black cushion to meditate properly, and the others say, you got to sit on a red cushion. Now, they can't all be right. I just think that these formulas are models for practice, but it's not one size fits all, and it's not beans in a pot. You don't, if you put so many beans in the pot that gets you enlightened. It doesn't work that way. It's much more. There's no formula for it. I mean, there are too many records of people who, like Sri Ramana Maharshi, a great enlightened sage of the 20th century, who just spontaneously became enlightened at the age of 16, and he didn't do any kriyas. So it can happen in any way. But actually, there's a famous saying from an American Zen teacher, which was, enlightenment is an accident. What all our meditation practice does is it makes us more accident-prone.
If you don't meditate, do you feel antsy?
Me personally?
Yeah.
Well, at this point, I've been doing this for 40-plus years. And what happens more and more is that the meditation is not just a matter of you when you sit down on your cushion or sit down in your chair, or one of my favorites, which is to lie down in my hammock. More and more, it's the line between so-called meditation and so-called life, the other 23 and a half hours of the day, that line becomes fuzzier and fuzzier. In a way, it all becomes meditation. Actually, the last chapter of my book is titled, The Door is Everywhere. Everything that you do starts having more and more of the same quality of opening into boundlessness that meditation has. So you might be sitting with your eyes closed and people will say, oh, he's meditating, or I might be taking a walk with my wife on the beach, and it's the same kind of opening into, out of feeling like a wave and more like feeling like the ocean.
Okay, let's go to Houstonia, Missouri. Andrea is with us, first-time caller. Hey, Andrea, go ahead.
Good evening to you both. It is a
You
fantastic and great honor to speak with you both, George and Dean.
Thank you.
Well, I had a question about, I don't meditate very often, but, when I do, sometimes I notice that, I'm sitting really, I can actually sit pretty still and not, itch my nose, and if there's a scratch. But there's at one point where I guess it's my pineal gland that goes off, and I'll get these immense waves going, and then at one point I feel like almost like a stone. I'm so still, and I have this immense energy just kind of waving through my entire body, and I'm actually kind of curious as to what it is because I can't seem to find out, and I also wonder too if there's something I should be doing with this energy that I'm feeling. So that's what I want to ask you.
Yeah, that's a great question. These kinds of phenomena are very well known. They're, in all the meditative traditions, it's known that you can have these waves of energy that can arise in your body. They're given different names in different traditions. Sometimes people will experience waves of emotional changes, or even part of the body, like your leg or your arm or your back might suddenly twitch or jump or something. And this all has to do with what, to put it in English, it's part of purification. It's like your radiator is getting flushed. All the old, we could say, stresses or the old traumas, all of that is getting sort of flushed out of the body. Now, we can't identify, there's no way to put your finger on, okay, right now when I'm feeling this wave of energy or this wave of emotion, I'm purifying the time the bulldog chased me down the sidewalk when I was 5 years old. There's no way to do that, and it's not necessary anyway. We just know that, okay, it's all good. the process, it takes care of itself, and we don't put too much significance on any of those particular phenomena. Just let them happen and let them play out in their own time.
Dean, as you go through this process of meditation, are there various techniques that could be better than others?
A lot of people, when people talk about techniques, usually they're talking about what I call the vehicle. For instance, a mantra, a sound, a meditative sound is one kind of vehicle. Putting the attention on the breath is another vehicle. Putting the attention on the open sky, that's another vehicle. And people can get very hung up on that and think, well, our vehicle is the best. Well, you can only really have good meditation if you meditate with this particular set of mantras or something. My experience is that that's not the case. That what's much more important than the particular choice of vehicle is the method of driving it. And the method of driving it is just barely doing anything at all, with it, barely touching the wheel. Eventually you realize you're not driving at all. You're along for the ride. And that is the main message of my book and of my teaching. I hear people coming up to me all the time and saying, I tried to meditate, but it was hard. Right? I tried to meditate, but it was hard. And what I tell them is, no, you tried to meditate, and therefore it was hard. So the whole thing is, don't try. Don't try. Just let it happen. Barely, lightly have your attention not focusing, not concentrating on the mantra or the sky or the heart center, whatever it is. Just lightly resting, and then just let gravity take over in its own time.
Okay, let's go next to Aaron in Buffalo, New York. Now, Aaron, you're up with us. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, how you doing, George?
Good, Aaron. Thank you.
I was just wondering, when I was younger, I used to do karate, and they teach you meditation and how to breathe right and all that, and I do that from time to time, and it seems like I do have a lot of energy that's released, but what has plagued me for many years of my life is anxiety. And I was wondering, through meditation, is there a way to try and guide yourself to release that anxiety and get past things like that? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely know what you mean. Our society is filled with that. Just recently, there was yet another study published in a scientific journal documenting marked release of anxiety and release of social anxiety. The anxiety people have being around other people through practice of meditation. But the key is that it has to be this kind of natural, effortless meditation that I'm talking about. Now, I know that the way meditation is taught in martial arts classes, and anywhere for that matter, varies a lot from teacher to teacher. My sort of anecdotal observation is that usually in martial arts classes, a lot of the meditation that's taught there is they may show you how to sit nicely and breathe nicely, but it's mostly in terms of concentrating. And there isn't that delicate skill of letting go. And if you start practicing in that way and doing it with some regularity for a few minutes, hopefully every day, you'll see anxiety becoming much, much less. I mean, some of the teachers that I've been with who are just, you walk into their presence and it's like being at the feet of Socrates or Yoda or someone, and they describe how before they started meditating that they could barely go out in public. I've had a couple of teachers like that.
What's the significance, Dean, of chanting?
Well, chanting is a particular method of using a mantra. One method of using it is to just silently, as we described earlier, silently having it in the mind and letting it melt away. Chanting it is using a mantra out loud, and that's also a well-established tradition in a lot of parts of the world. And you just keep saying it, and whether you're saying Hail Mary or Hare Krishna or Om Mani Padme Hum. If you do it enough times and it starts to lose its meaning, you can take any word, you say pencil enough times, and it starts to lose its meaning. It just becomes pure sound. And then after a while, you start going even beyond sound just to pure beingness, just to, again, settling down into yourself, into that more oceanic region. So that's another vehicle.
Next up, we go to Jill in Colonial Heights, Virginia. Welcome to the program, Jill. You're on the air with us.
Thank you, Mr. Norrie. And Dean, it's wonderful to hear this. I'm a Vietnam vet, retired United States Army, and when I came back, I was back like 10 years, and I started having flashbacks and nightmares. And I was fortunate enough to get a therapist that had been in the Himalayas, and they taught me how to meditate. They taught us how to meditate with relaxation, with visualization, and taught us how to get to what they called the now, in the now where there's nothing left in your head, and you're like, whoa, where am I? I'm just here. And your whole body is just here. And they taught us how to visualize taking our flashbacks and our nightmares, and like mine that I chose was a dump truck, and my brain would open up, into a door, and it would just dump all this black stuff out. That's what I visualized. And then I watched the dump truck go to this dump site with this great big hole, and it just would pour it in there, and then this crane would bury it, and I would do this over and over. And before that, and this had been like 5 years, I couldn't even go into a store. I couldn't be around people. I didn't hardly leave my house. And I was on like convalescent leave for like 4 years from the military. And my God, I do this every day. I still do this every day. It's over 40 years now since I've been back. And I'm a changed person.
Well, I guess it works.
Yeah, it does. I'm so glad to hear from you. And it's very, very important, because with all these guys and women coming back now from Iraq and Afghanistan, and a lot of them, with serious PTSD, and there are a number of programs that have been going on for a while working with the wounded warriors with meditation, and they're having incredible results. And I really encourage anyone who's in that situation, look around. The internet, you get connected up with someone in 10 minutes, and go take advantage of that.
Dean, since you've been doing this over the years, what has been for you personally probably the most significant thing that's happened in terms of meditation?
Wow. Oh, there's so many. I mean, in one sense, it's every day. One particularly poignant episode was the illness and the death of my first wife. Maggie was just an incredible person. She was a former fashion model, super mom. She became a really respected meditation teacher, and then she got cancer. And what happened was...
Hold on for 1 second. We'll have you finish that up, Dean. We'll be back. On our next Coast to Coast program, the co-author with Stephen Hawking, Leonard Mlodinow, joins us, talking about physics and space. I'm looking forward to that. That's a split show. And we'll be back in a moment with Dean Sluyter and final phone calls as we talk about natural meditation. And welcome back to Coast, Dean Sluyter with us. Dean, so we've heard about stories of people with clairvoyance because of meditation, but what about levitation? You've looked at that?
Well, I've never seen it happen. I've seen people trying to do it. There are stories about people supposedly doing that and doing all kinds of incredible things. The Tibetans have stories about people flying through the air, and it's not all thousands of years ago. There was one very great, wonderful sage in India in the mid-20th century named Neem Karoli Baba, and there are stories about him being in 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 cities at once. And after he died, people showing up at the town where he died, and they said, he died. That can't be. I just saw him in this other town 100 miles away. So, who knows? I don't know.
That would be fascinating to see, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah, sure. No, I'd be the first in line. But, the really fascinating thing about it to me is that in the traditional texts where they describe these things and very seriously talk about, and they even give methods for, okay, if you're sufficiently expanded, your consciousness is sufficiently expanded, here's a formula for levitating, and here's the formula for understanding the speech of animals and so forth. And they lay it all out, and then they say, but you know what? All that is a distraction. All that is just, it's playing with little bigger waves on the surface of the ocean, little fancier waves. What the real thing is all about is getting deep inside yourself and experiencing that you are the ocean, that you are boundless. And the way we usually go through our lives, just having our buttons pushed, being obsessed with problems, worrying about the past, worrying about the future, worrying, am I ever going to make money? Am I ever going to find love? It's no way to live. And it turns out that just by turning inside yourself once a day and just letting go within yourself like that, you start less and less living that way, and just more and more becomes ease. It becomes grace. I was talking about my wife Maggie when she was dying of cancer.
Yeah,
she wound up the oncology unit where she was going. They were so bowled over by the composure and grace and sense of humor with which she went through the whole thing that they had her come back and train everyone in the unit in meditation.
That's something. And you met her through meditation, didn't you?
Yeah.
Session.
I met her on a meditation retreat up in the Catskills.
Huh.
And then years later, some years after she died, I met my second wife, Yafa, on another meditation retreat.
See, there you go.
And by the way, the proof positive that men are idiots is that they go to bars to meet women instead of meditation retreats or yoga classes.
You have much more in common that way.
Yeah, and at yoga classes, gentlemen, you'll be outnumbered 10-1.
I always get asked from people at events, special conferences, UFO events, that people can't meet people other places. They've said that so many times.
Right.
They need to go to the same kind of spots, don't they?
Yeah, to find, like-minded people who are kind of on the same wavelength as you are.
Okay, let's go to the phones, wrap things up here. We shall go to Dylan in Utah. Welcome to the show. Dylan, go ahead.
Hey, how's it going, fellas?
Good, Dylan.
Hey, I got into meditation in high school, and it never really worked out. I mean, I would always come out of it as just a little more at ease, nothing serious. And then into college, a friend got me onto lucid dreaming. Mm-hmm. And the only way I got into that is, every night I would, try to clear my mind and this and that. And it almost seems it goes along the same lines of meditation. You clear your mind, you focus almost on nothing. Everything is gone. I mean, and I would get this feeling that you are being pulled out of your body. And when you do that, when that happens, you kind of go into the void. It's almost as if you're on the Starship Enterprise, and they hit light speed and, the stars are whizzing by. It feels like that. Like you could almost feel the G's pushing you into your bed. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that has any correlation to a certain point. If you feel anything like that, when you hit a certain level of meditation or progress, if that's common. And another question I had was, I mean, when you're clearing your mind, are you lowering your defenses? Whether it's spiritually, are you opening your mind up for other outside forces to kind of, push their way in? And I'll take my answer offline.
Okay. Let me address the first question first. Sure, sometimes it can feel like what you're describing. Sometimes you feel like, you're going through hyperspace and the Millennial Falcon. It can feel all kinds of ways. The main thing that the sages, the wise teachers who've been doing the research and development on this stuff for centuries, what they say is, don't make a big deal out of any one particular experience. Just because it happens one way one time or even 1,000 times and you feel, wow, that's really flashy. Don't get attached to it and don't think that that is the measure of a deep or significant experience, because there's always going to be deeper stuff. And the deepest stuff of all is the simplest, where you don't need a lot of special effects, where it becomes just being. Now, the second question, no, that meditation does not lower your defenses. It does not make you prone to being dominated by other people or other forces. It just doesn't work that way. And there's all kinds of warrior traditions. The samurai who practiced meditation. I've got a good friend who is an oil trader, and I've sat with him in the room he calls the Bat Cave, where he's there trading against all the other guys. He's experienced walking out and coming back, from the bathroom and discovering he just lost $1 million in the market.
Jeez.
And you
go back in a trance.
Well, the thing is, you can't be vulnerable. You can't be a weak character. The kind of cliche, the stereotype of the passive meditator is that you're just this happy, blissful vegetable sitting in a cave somewhere grinning and drooling, and that's not the case.
Have you ever had anybody go into a trance state and not come out of it?
Well, meditation is not a trance state, so no, that doesn't apply.
Let's go to Michael in Whittier, California. Hello, Michael. It's your turn on Coast to Coast.
Hello, George. Hello, Dean.
Hi.
I understand there's different mantras, and a lot of them, from what I understand, begin or end with that Om. But I understand there's a meaning to that. Can you maybe explain that for me, or if you know what I'm talking about at all? It's supposed to have some sort of meaning, or supposed to open up something while you're trying to clear your mind. Just that.
What is that, Mike? Dean?
Well,
actually, I do have a chapter in the book where I discuss this, in the chapter on meditating on sound, and one of the best known sounds is usually in English it's represented as Om, O-M. And
it's a resonance, isn't it?
Yes, it's a resonance, and it can be used out loud, as we were saying before, at the beginning or end of long mantras, or just by itself as a seed mantra. It can be used inwardly, silently, melting into it. The thing is, there is a subtlety of the pronunciation, which I get into in the book. It's not really an M like in English. It's more like the French word bon, B-O-N, meaning good. There's that, or in the English, huh, H-U-H, at the end of the word huh. There's this very subtle, instead of the vibration just being confined to your lips, where it sort of fills your whole skull. But it takes a little time to walk people through that, so it's all in the book.
What is it about the chants or the hue that does what it does?
Well, it goes back to research and development, that certain sounds just seem to have the right, we could say, psychoacoustic qualities. They have the right resonance with the human nervous system to, on the one hand, soothe things so that the awareness becomes more settled, and at the same time enliven things so that instead of just falling asleep, you settle into a state of restful alertness, where the mind is quiet as it is in sleep, but you don't conk out, so you're vividly awake to marinate in that delicious silence.
Daryl is in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Hi, Daryl. Good morning to you.
Hi, George. First time I've called. I'm really excited about what you're talking about.
usually don't have people to relate with me about these things. I've done meditation for a long time.
Well, you've got the person now. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to talk about my experience with it and the vehicle I've used that I can almost tap into a state of meditation almost every time.
Sure.
And into the energy. What I've done is I'll lay out in the sun and listen to a certain type of music, like you're saying, with the right rhythms, and do something like a chant. And what I do is I'm yielding my heart and mind, and I kind of go into like a spirit realm. And then I feel that energy just floods my body, and I can use that energy to do things like control the circumstances in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I have healed people with it, and I've brought financial things into my life with it, and I have also caused people to feel the love that I was feeling while I was in that state.
Mm-hmm. Two things I'll say to you, George. Three things. One is wow, you got a lot going on. The second is I would advise keep your eye on the prize. What is the main thing, and what are the things that might be considered distractions? And sometimes that question becomes a little bit tricky, a little bit delicate when you start getting into sort of higher energies like you're describing. The third thing, I've got some news for you. I'm going to be in Chattanooga in a couple of days. I'm going to be giving a talk and leading a workshop in Chattanooga on Friday and Saturday. So if you go to my website, all the information is there. And I go on the road. By the way, I'll travel anywhere I'm invited. I'm going to be in Kansas City the following week, and if you go to my website, you see I'm heading to Chicago in June, and anywhere people invite me. I love to travel. Anywhere there's a group of people, we can find a space, I'll go there, and we'll do a workshop, and we'll spend the day together.
Do you find that the crowds are getting bigger, Dean?
Yeah, with this book, this is my fourth book, and this one is getting the best exposure. I'm actually featured in 3 national magazines this month.
That's huge.
It is, and one of them.
And this program is.
One of them is In Style. And when my sister-in-law heard that, she said, "Wow, everyone reads In Style." So I guess I'm in good shape with this.
Good for you. And this is your first time on our show, I believe.
Yeah, it is, and this is great. Yep.
We'll go to New Jersey now. Suzanne's with us on Coast to Coast. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Hello, Dean. Hello,
Hi.
George. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Very happy to be able to share my practice that I've been doing every morning and evening for 46 years.
Oh, good for you.
And it's the Buddhist law that we chant, and the Buddhist teachings, 84,000 teachings, he had a reason for every teaching. When he taught the Lotus Sutra, he taught that sutra for the age of Mappo, which is our age of delusion and degradation, for the people of this age in particular. And within that, he clarified the essence of his teachings as the law, the mystic law, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, which is a sound, which is a light. So we practice the Bodhisattva teaching, which is we go among the people. And because we chant the mystic law of the universe, we connect with our voices. Our voice is the power, that we connect to the light that's within our life, and it becomes like a mighty sword that we use to shatter the darkness of our life.
Do you feel stronger, Suzanne, after you do this?
Oh, absolutely.
You can feel it.
It's like Dean says, it calms and it energizes. But this law, this is the mystic law of life and death, so it is not a man-made law because it is a light. You can't describe it in words. It's a light in your life because
you've got to be able to do it. Dean, we're almost running out of time here, but in this particular case, is there a right way or a wrong way when you do meditation?
Well, in my experience, the right way is to take it easy. and you might find that yourself drawn to working with a particular mantra, as this person just described. You might feel drawn to working in some other way, but that the one thing that unites it, the one principle that I've found in all my years with this, is that what makes it work is to not work. If you work hard at it, you find out that, you sit down and it's hard work, and then you won't keep doing it. If you just let go,
let it happen,
take it easy, let it happen, you have some specific method for setting the initial direction, and then just keep the lightest possible touch on the steering wheel and let it happen, and try to get a little time to do it every day, and your life really will be transformed.
And how soon does that kick in, that transformation?
Very quickly. It doesn't have to be years. I've seen with the people that I've taught, and I just read a study confirming this, that a lot of people will see real changes just in a couple of days.
That's remarkable.
Yeah, it is.
And are there different forms of meditation for different things you want to accomplish?
Not really.
Okay.
It's
not like chants for spells or anything like that.
No, it's much simpler than that. It's not like you got to get, one from column A and two from column B, because whatever we're trying to accomplish, it all comes down to awareness. If the awareness is bright and clear and settled and balanced and warm and compassionate and has a wide-angle view, then whatever you're doing, it's going to go well.
All right, Dean, thanks for being on the program. Really appreciate it. Dean Sluyter. For Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladouceur, Stephanie Smith, Chris Morrison, George Knapp, I'm George Norrie, somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.